Welcome to Lesson 7, Cone Shape and Shading. Today we are going to talk about the shape of a cone and how to shade a cone with charcoal. But first, let's go over the things we've learned recently. We can see light and dark. When we draw, we show the highlights and the shadows, right? Don't be afraid to mark. If we make wrong marks, they actually can help us to find the right ones. Highlights change into shadows, sometimes suddenly, like from the kind of the side of the cone to the base of the cone. There is a sudden change from highlight to shadow. And sometimes they change slowly. Here we see the gradual gradient from highlight to shadows. Paper is flat, right? Objects are not. So we have to draw exactly what we see from one angle. Don't move. Also, the direction of the light changes where the highlights, midtones, and shadows are. If our light is coming from this direction, shadows are going to be opposite and midtones will be between. Bright white, like my paper here, is rare in our world. So we begin all drawings with a toned ground. Now let's get into cone shape. Let's talk about this object I have here. A cone has a circle base. That's a lot like the cylinder we had the last lessons. It also had a circle base, but it had a circle top. Do you notice a difference? A cone has a point for a top, and all the edges of this circle rise up and get smaller and smaller and smaller until they meet together into this point. So this shape is what we call a cone. Let's go ahead and we're going to draw this cone from one angle. And the angle I'm going to choose will actually hide the base from our view, and it will look something like this. Observe the curve. We only see, it's like the bottom of the cylinder. We only see the curve at the front. There is a curve at the back, it's just hiding. So we're going to draw it two ways. The first way, we're going to start with a full ellipse so that we remember the circle that is there. And the second we will do with just the curve facing outward. So grab a piece of charcoal, and before we begin drawing, we are going to tone our ground. And as a reminder, a toned ground is a mid-tone gray that fills your page. I'm using the flat side of a rather larger piece of charcoal to get my toned ground going, and my chamois to just gently blend it out. Nice. Okay, let's begin. The first example I'm going to give you is the cone drawn with an ellipse. Now, well, yes, so we're going to begin with the small ellipse, just like our cylinder when we did the top of the cylinder. So this is my ellipse. Here we go. I don't like it. I'm going to start over. Yeah, I think I'm happier with that. We'll see. Now, my trick for drawing an ellipse is, or for drawing a cone, find around the center of the ellipse you drew and go upwards. And pick up a spot about the height of the cone and make a dot. And now my goal is going to be to bring the very edge of each side, we're going to bring them up and connect with the dot. And so in order to get this, you'll notice I use my arm and my charcoal gently to kind of estimate where I'm going to go, and then begin to drag up to connect. Nice. And the other side as well. If you are able to turn your page, you might want to do that. I'm not going to today, but I think I would normally do that. For filming purposes, nah. Okay, so there. I have, now it almost looks like an upside down ice cream cone right now, like if I could see inside the base of the cone. That's what this is reminding me of. However, we wanted to draw it like this. So what I'm going to do is actually get rid of that back line and take just a corner of my chamois and gently, I'm erasing that back. And I'm just gonna kind of hide any evidence that it was ever there. Ta-da! The shape of a cone. We're gonna do it again, and this time I'm not going to draw the back. I'm just gonna estimate the approximate curve of the front. And again, it's okay if my lines go too far. And then I'll measure from the center of the curve. I'll make it about the same height. Notice my lines start really light, and then as I become more confident that, yeah, I think that's the right line, I get darker. I'm gonna erase that little dot because they met a little higher, and that's fine. Erase marks that don't quite work. Just smudge them out. All right, there we have a second cone. Just the shape, very simple shape, about 3 lines, right? We got the front curve and then the 2 sides that meet at a point. Now, we are going to discuss shading. And for this part of the lesson, I actually have provided everyone with a picture. This picture. This is a picture of this cone. And I chose to bring my light source in from the left. So we have our highlights, our brightest whites on the object over here. Again, the paper itself is not, doesn't count toward what we're doing today. We're only looking at the shading of the object. The paper is bright white, but like we've discussed, things in our world are not typically bright white. So I'm going to use this shape here to adopt the shading I can observe from here. Let's talk about the shapes that we see. If we begin observing the gradient from highlight to midtone to shadow, we can see that it happens quite slowly here at the bottom. Lots of space for highlight from about here, I would say, to about here is pretty bright. And then I'm seeing midtones from about here to here and shadows for the remaining amount. That's pretty even. I would say it's almost divided into thirds visually. 1/3 being highlight, 1/3 being midtone, and then the last being shadow. And as we go up, you can, if you notice with me, I can see, let me point with my tortillon, I can see the line of the edge of the midtone and shadow here. It kind of follows the line here as it's tapering and getting smaller. So is the shape of the midtone is tapering down to get smaller. And so if we observe at the very point, I am noticing it almost looks like there's no midtone up here. I see like a highlight side and a shadow side, and the midtone is very thin, but so are the highlight and the shadow. So as it's going, it's like they're evenly split still, but it gets smaller and tighter. And my eyes are telling me here that the shadow transition is happening faster. Can you see there as the highlight is more of a sudden change into the shadow rather than this gradual change? So as we fill it in. We're going to try to pay full attention to that. Now I'm going to begin, and my shape is kind of small, so I don't think I'll place it flat this time like I usually do. Instead, I'll scrub just with this tip. Notice how I'm holding it, right? We have our little, like an alligator mouth, using my 3 fingers typically to hold my charcoal like this. It is not a pencil. We can't really do a good job if we try to hold it like a pencil. So get it in the front of your fingers, and then we're gonna start adding my shadow. Why am I doing my shadow on the right this time? Because that's what I did in the photo, so that we can practice a shadow on the right side of a shape. Last time we did it on the left, so it's good for us to try different ways. Okay, I'm gonna scrub in about the shape of my shadow. Doesn't have to be perfect because we are gonna blend it. It goes all the way up. If you do too much of it, don't worry. The best thing you can do is not let yourself get worried about your drawing not being perfect. Okay, so I would say that's pretty good for my shadow. Now I'm gonna do the same scrubbing with the charcoal, but just a little lighter. I don't want as much material. Right, for that mid-tone. And then because I have a toned ground, I'm actually not going to add anything for my highlight. Instead, I'm going to take my finger and just see what it's like when I begin to blend it out. One thing I do want to address is these outlines on my highlight side. I don't want harsh, strong outlines. So sometimes I just like tap them with a relatively clean finger to reduce their visual impact, because they can get very distracting and make your drawing look less real. Okay, back to blending my midtones. So I'll just sit here and work with it until I'm happy, and so should you. Let's see. As you can notice, my finger is nice and full of charcoal, which is a good finger for blending a shadow. If I were to use my pinky, it would pick up way too much material. I could, if I wanted a little bit of a highlight, I could actually use a clean finger over in the highlight section. So just be aware that your fingers can play a different role depending on how much charcoal you have built up on them. And then when we get to really tight areas, like the tip, my finger is too big, so I need to use my tortillon to gently come in and soften what I have there. The highlight side on the point will definitely need a little work, so I'm going to come back to that. I'll use my tortillon on the base of the shadow too. I mean the deepest part of the shadow, because it needs a little bit of like a darker effect, and with my finger it will pick up more material than my tortillon. It will pick up more charcoal. Making sure that I keep the integrity of the shape here. I don't want to lose the shape itself. I'm gonna check myself. I can tell that I'm not quite getting it. My 1/3 highlight, 1/3 mid-tone, 1/3 shadow. It's not coming together quite yet. So I'll just keep working on it little by little, observing, going back and forth with my drawing. Or I'm sorry, this is my, like, the source of what I'm getting my shading from. It's not a drawing. Typically I would like to draw this in real life, but for the sake of a class, it's nice for us to be able to see the object all the same. And when we're in a room, we can't all see it. I think my mid-tone might be just a little too dark. Let's see if I can. there's a line there. I can need to get rid of that. There we go. That's becoming a little bit more satisfactory to me. Just smudge out that transition because it's not a line. And then now I'm going to grab my kneaded eraser, warm it up, and I am now going to come in with a little bit of highlight, because what I don't want is my highlight to be the exact color of my background color. It just blends right in, especially because we don't want harsh lines. So here we go. I'm gonna drag some highlight in with my eraser. Ooh, that's looking nice. I had an art teacher once tell me that the last 1% of the work that you do on your drawing is the most important, and it's the part that will bring it to real life, to make it just look very real. And that was always my favorite part of a drawing, that very last 1%. Now, as I am highlighting, I am noticing that my highlight in my drawing looks a little bit brighter than in this image. That's okay. It doesn't have to be exact, but I am matching with what's working for my paper and what is helping the shape look three-dimensional. So let me finish up this area of highlight. The point is going to be the most detail work that we'll work on today. And so, you know, it's use the very kind of like push into a tip of your eraser to get just right in there. You can hear it tapping as I'm trying to create the point. And then I'm going to come in with my tortillon to blend and soften that transition, especially at the base. Right here we can almost not even see these lines. Need to pick up some of this here. This line is too harsh. Can you see this line here being too harsh? I'm going to just tap my eraser on the line, soften it. Again, I see another harsh transition. I'm going to soften it. And so it should be with you. You should be working and working until nothing stands out to you as needing to be refined. And of course, the more complex your drawing becomes, the longer that process will take. So that is our lesson today on cone shape and shading. And the thing I want you to take away from today is that objects have things in common. Like different shapes have things in common. Grab the cylinder out. So we have a cone and a cylinder, and they have in common this flat circle base. But they are a different shape. But because we learned about ellipses and we're drawing with ellipses when we learned a cylinder, now we get to apply that knowledge and use it in also a new way when we learn the cone.